everyone. Jimmy, this is Luna. What's wrong? Go over there with your sister. No? Hi. I am here to talk about the Highly Sensitive Person book by Elaine Aron. I did an introduction to this book last week. You can find on the video below. Just for some background, I am a 60-year-old mother of 4, and I'm just learning this along with you. I had some issues in my life, health issues, and things that were brought up in therapy, and we realized that a lot of my issues have to do with being highly sensitive, with carrying this trait. And so learning how to live a life that embraces it makes all the difference in the world. So I'm reading this again for the 3rd time, and I thought I would make some videos and learn along with you. And I'd love to hear your comments about what you think of the book so far and your experiences being highly sensitive, or your experiences with someone you know being highly sensitive. If you haven't done so, take the test in the link below to see if you might carry this trait. There's also a test in the book. Last week we talked about how the highly sensitive trait is just in our genes. It's an inherited trait, and that it is not an illness or a flaw. It can be a superpower if embraced and managed, and if we take the time to learn about how we best thrive. In the author's note, it describes the acronym DOES, DOES, and it stands for depth of processing, overstimulation, E for emotional reactivity and empathy, and the S is for sensing the subtle. Do you have a tendency to stop and think about what someone says longer than others do? I do. And a lot of that is depth of processing. I remember a lot of different instances. One in particular, when I was working in the corporate environment, I remember my boss would say something to me, and I would look at him for longer than usual, but I was just processing what he said, and he'd look at me and go, What else? And I'm like, oh, nothing, just thinking about what you said. It's like I was just still processing it. Or around family or friends, it's like I stop, and I guess they think I'm staring for a little bit longer than usual when they say something, but it's me processing it. And I'm processing the whole thing. Depth of processing. We process things deeper than the majority of people on the earth, and it takes longer. So that's that. I'll refer to highly sensitive person as HSP, even though the new scientific term is sensory processing sensitivity, not disorder. Sensitivity is totally different. This is not something that can be corrected or needs to be cured, because it's not a disorder or a disease. It is a trait, like green eyes and brown hair. We have a tendency to process information more deeply, so it takes longer. And we relate and compare what we learn to past experiences. So while I'm staring at someone after they say something, it's my brain, boop, 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 processing. And she also says, when you make a decision consciously, you may notice that you're slower than others because you think over all the options so carefully. That's depth of processing too. And we talked about that in the last video, how HSPs use more of those parts of the brain called the insula that are associated with deeper processing, especially tasks that involve noticing subtleties. Like, for example, if I open the newspaper, I guess people don't read newspapers much anymore or look on my screen, but it used to be, even when I was little, I'd open the newspaper and I could spot the typo right away. I saw the misspelled word, and that's what made me valuable in my job, because my first real job in an office was in public relations, and I was doing a lot of editing and wrote the daily newsletter. So that's what they're talking about with the subtleties. And a lot of times it can cause misunderstandings, originating from me, because I assumed, before I assumed that other people, I just assumed they would notice everything I noticed. Not that I thought it out that well, but when I would notice things and other people wouldn't, it confused me. And they don't. I can't assume that people are seeing things how I see them. And I guess that's true for anybody. Leave me below in the comments some subtleties that you look back on and think, oh yeah, I do notice those things that other people don't notice. Like another one is, I will walk into the kitchen and we have those recessed lighting, maybe 8 lights, recessed lighting that are up in the ceiling. And if one of them is even dim a little bit, or if it's out, as soon as I walk in the kitchen, I'm like, it seems dark in here. It's like I notice it right away. And again, it's not like I'm looking for it. It's just something I automatically, naturally notice. So, and this came in very handy back in caveman days, because we need all the different types of people. And HSPs were probably the ones that could sense danger right away. And I know I'm like that. I can sense danger just right away. I just do. It's like intuition. But back in the old times, they were the ones that would keep people safe. Well, they wouldn't be the ones actually doing the work. They would notice the danger and notice the subtleties and things changing. And then the other people would step up and take care of whatever it was. So everybody has a role, but that was probably the role of HSPs way back then, is, keeping people safe and alerting them to danger when it was near. So next is O for overstimulation. And since we notice every little thing, we wear out sooner from having to process so much so thoroughly. Dr. Aron says, others not noticing much or any of what you have will not tire as quickly. They may even think it quite strange that you find it too much to sightsee all day and go to a nightclub in the evening. I do have experiences with that. One that specifically comes to mind is visiting relatives and driving for 12 hours, going through big cities with traffic, and we finally get there with 4 children, 2 in diapers, 1 is a newborn, and all these people around me when we get there. And then the next morning having to wake up super early, make lunches for my family, and after no sleep, newborn, traveling, HSP, not a good combination. And then we had to go do things all day with a bunch of people at different places. We had to drive 2 or 3 hours, spend a bunch of time there, spend the time back. It was just so much for my system. I just could not handle it. And on the way back, we stopped to get something to eat at a restaurant. And I said, I'm just going to sit in the car. I'm not even that hungry. And I was a little hungry, but I just could not handle any more stimulation after all that and being so tired. And it was just too much on my system. And so I stayed in the car and nursed my baby. And I think my husband brought me a bag of food and some water. You just are expected to keep up with the general population, and it just doesn't work for me. I know my limit, and so now I can take care of that and plan out my social situations more carefully and not be a people pleaser and feel like I have to do what everybody else is doing just to fit in or just to please them. no matter who they are, I have to take care of myself first, because my health and my well-being is my responsibility. So by stepping back and taking the time I need to recover, or stepping back and not doing the thing that everybody wants me to do, for me, I look at that as being responsible. I'm being responsible by taking care of myself. So that's what that is. So once I reframed it in that way, that really helped me to not feel guilty for not fulfilling other people's expectations of me. It's my responsibility. I do find it interesting, other people's reactions when we're with them sometimes, because when we don't keep up with them, and we are kind of sometimes looked down upon for not keeping pace and not doing all the things, and maybe called lazy, but yet, okay, so we're expected to keep up with them and keep up with the extroverted world. But what about, why don't we expect them to slow down with us? It's like we don't put expectations on them to not do things, or to slow down, or to keep pace with our relaxed, more peaceful lifestyle. And they're never looked down upon for not keeping pace with us, but yet we're expected to keep pace with them. And that's just the world we live in. Susan Cain, in her book called Quiet, that's what she talks about, is how we live in an extroverted world and how we navigate that. So that's a whole nother thing, but that's a really good book. But anyway, it's just interesting that we're expected to keep pace with the extroverted world, but they're not expected to keep pace with us. And like my friend says, that just ain't right. That just ain't right. As Henry David Thoreau put it, if we don't keep pace with our companions, perhaps it's because we hear a different drummer. Let us step to the music which we hear. I love that. We'll never be fully happy in life if we follow someone else's version of what they think we should do, or what they think, how they think we should be. We'll just never be fully happy that way. Dr. Aron again urges us to be careful to not mix up being an HSP with a problem condition like sensory discomfort, which can by itself be a sign of a disorder due to problems with sensory processing. With sensory discomfort, it could be a sign of a disorder which is due to problems with processing. So that's kind of what differentiates it too. With a disorder, you have problems with processing. But with HSP, we have an unusually good sensory processing. It's not that we have problems with processing. It's actually deeper processing, and that's the key. It's not a problem with it. It's a good thing. And so we process very well, just in a different way. So next is E for emotional reactivity and also empathy. As mentioned in the last video, HSPs react more to both positive and negative experiences, and E is also for empathy. Studies show when HSPs are looking at photos showing emotion and facial expressions, that they have increased activity in the insula, more so than the general population. And there's more activity in their mirror neuron system, which helps us to know others' intentions and how they feel. So that's an interesting fact she shared. And then she goes on to say, HSPs do not just know how someone else feels, but actually feel that way themselves. And for me, not only emotionally, but also physical sensations, like I can't watch football. It's like, or seeing violence. And I used to think maybe some of it was CPTSD, complex PTSD from seeing violence growing up, which some of it may be, but a lot of it is also HSP, because when I watch football or clanging together, whether it's violent intentions or not, I feel it in my body. It's like the chemicals inside of my veins change and I feel it. Or I used to like watching that show called Intervention, and it's about when they're helping people that have drug problems. And sometimes they would show somebody with the needle in their arm, and I have to look away and do this. It's like I can't. I feel it. I actually feel it in my body. So it's not that I'm scared of it, I just feel it. It's emotional sensations and physical sensations. And also, when seeing photos of loved ones unhappy, sensitive persons also showed more activation in areas showing that they wanted to do something, to act, and to make things better, which is empathy. They would want to act on their empathic emotions. There is a common misunderstanding that emotions cause us to think illogically. But recent scientific thinking has placed emotion at the center of wisdom. I love that. Emotion at the center of wisdom. So our emotions are good. It's not a negative thing. It's not that they cause us to not make good decisions. They cause us to make better decisions if we manage and embrace it. Our emotions can be a catalyst for growth. They can also obviously be negative and take us down the wrong path. So it's important that we recognize our emotions, feel our emotions, and not make our emotions the enemy, but turn our emotions into a helper, turn our emotions into a gift, and use those fully, and just think what we could accomplish. Studies show that unless people have some emotional reason to learn something, they do not learn it very well or at all. And of course, we're talking about adults here. I just had to throw that picture in because it was so cute. So our strong emotions are actually a catalyst for deep learning. So we can use our emotions and embrace them. A lot of times if I have an emotion that's overwhelmingly negative, I try to stop, find a place where I can be by myself, breathe, close my eyes, and I think of where in my body am I feeling that. And then I breathe into that space and feel the emotion. I cry if I need to, do whatever I need to do, and breathe through it. And so it's like I'm breathing the emotion out until it can just float away. So acknowledging our emotions and feeling them in a safe space so that they can be released is important. It's important to me as an HSP, and I have found that since I started doing that, I don't hold on to negative emotions as much, and I feel lighter and freer. And so that's one way we can manage our strong emotions and turn them into a catalyst for growth. And then Dr. Aron continues, when HSPs react more, it is as much or more to positive emotions, such as curiosity, anticipation of success, using that shortcut others don't know about, a pleasant desire for something, satisfaction, joy, and contentedness. Maybe HSPs have evolved so that we especially relish a good outcome and figure out more than others how to make it happen. So we can use our emotions in that way too, imagining a wonderful outcome, and then we take the actions to make it work, and we have the energy behind the emotions. Lastly, S is for sensing the subtle. And even though it's important, sensing is not at the heart of the trait, she says. Processing is more likely the heart of this trait. It's not so much about extraordinary senses as the brain doing more complex processing of sensory information. So it's not so much about having better hearing or better eyesight than the majority, but it's more about the brain is doing more complex processing. So it's more about the processing than the senses, even though the senses plays into it, but she explains it more in the book. And it's more like catching the subtle meaning of words, or as she mentioned earlier, the subtle facial expressions. In my own experience, I notice the energy in a person or a room. I can walk in and right away I know how that person is feeling. Like I can sense anger, I can sense frustration, I can sense happiness or peacefulness. It's like a sixth sense. And it's not that, I go around telling people how I think they feel. It's not that at all. I can just sense the subtle energy of the room, and so I can adjust my behavior accordingly, which I don't know if that's a healthy thing or not, but I do notice that. I remember an experience having to do with sensing the subtle. I remember driving with a person, and this was 35 years ago at least, but I still remember it because of the way it made me feel. And it was me with another person driving down the road. They were driving, and I was looking out the window, and I saw beautiful purple flowers. And I mentioned something, how pretty they were, and then we kept driving, and then I saw more, and I said, oh, those purple flowers are so nice. And I think it was the way the sun was hitting them, and I just noticed them. And the other person said, wow, you don't get out much, do you? So, so that took me aback, like, oh, and this was before I knew about my highly sensitive nature, and it just took me aback to where I didn't want to share things like that with this person anymore because it was kind of like made fun of. But anyway, I'm sure everybody has had certain experiences like that you wonder why people react the way they do about something, and then once you know about this trait, you go, okay, they must not be HSP, so they don't notice the things that I notice. So that just goes to show me, looking back, that I need to realize that other people that I'm around may not have the same, they don't process things the same way that I do, which is fine. Like I keep saying, we need all the different people, and this is the way we were made to, everyone has a different purpose. And so it really helps me to understand some past experiences of mine when I realize that other people, or the people that I may have been with, process their information differently than me. So I can't expect them to have the same reaction that I do. So that's what I got from that. I'd love to hear your experiences with some of these things in the comments. And Elaine Aron confirms this by saying, every highly sensitive person is different and different at different times. As far as overstimulation in life, like the workplace or in stressful life situations, some HSPs will just quietly tolerate the situation, or they'll just leave the situation knowing that it's not for them. Whereas other HSPs, usually with a more stressful past, will feel more victimized and upset, and at the same time be less able to place themselves in the right environments and avoid the wrong ones. Maybe they feel they have to please others or prove something. So it just goes to show us that all HSPs are different. Myself, I think I would be more apt to just exit the situation or find a way to escape that situation. That's just how I've always dealt with chaos around me. Growing up, when things would happen, I would literally go sit in the corner and hide and just watch everything around me. It's like I was invisible. And so that's just my natural thing. I don't want to get in the arena and fight. I want to just exit the situation. And I have gotten in the arena at times when I shouldn't have, but I feel more comfortable now just stepping off the merry-go-round and not engaging with toxic behavior. It just keeps me safe, and it's what I need to do. And we are all different at different times. There have been times when I have felt victimized or put up with a situation for too long. And the good news is we can learn how to not be victims. I feel like in my 20s, I had a huge victim mentality. And the older I get, the more I learn that I am not a victim. I'm a victor. So we're only a victim because of our thoughts. I've learned more how to not take things so personally and There's a good book about that. I think it's Don Miguel Ruiz. I'll put his name up and leave a link. But he wrote a series of books. One is called The 4 Agreements. And one of the agreements is don't take anything personally. And then he has a whole chapter about that. But so I have learned not to take things as personally and try to realize as something's happening that stresses me out and is aimed toward me, I try to think, well, this has more to do with that person. Something's going on in their life to make them react this way. I don't want to take on guilt of something that is not mine to take. So that's one way that we can just not be affected by that, is learn when to stay and when to step out. Our emotions are our own responsibility. No one can make us feel a certain way, even though I use that language sometimes. I know the difference now. I used to not, but now I know I don't have to take on other emotions. And it takes practice and it takes a lot of work to step out. For instance, someone was raising their voice at me, and it was actually over the phone a couple of years ago. And I just looked at the phone and kind of stepped outside of myself. I didn't want to participate and get into it with them. Stepped out of myself and thought, wow, that person's really going through a rough time. And we can just step out and separate ourselves from their emotion. We don't have to participate in other people's emotions. It's enough just to take care of our own, right? So it's just a practice, and we can manage our emotions by managing our thoughts, because our emotions come from our thoughts. So if we change our thoughts, then our emotions change. But that's a whole nother topic. So we just try not to give other people control over our emotions. And it's hard work, but it's so worth it. And like they say, progress, not perfection, right? As long as we're going in the right direction. And that is a healthy direction. So DOES is a wonderful guideline generally, but it's not infallible, she says. It's dependent on our past and just so many other variables. So that's all that I have for today. And the next time I'm going to skip the preface because I don't want this to take 5 years. So I'm just going to go straight to chapters 1 and maybe 2, depending. I probably won't be able to do 2 chapters because it's a challenge just to do 1 chapter because there's just so much good things in there. But I'm going to try to go through this study a little quicker and do a chapter a week. So if you are going along with this study, you can read chapter 1 for next week. Thank you so much for watching my video today. I really want to hear from you in the comments on your experiences with high sensitivity, and also what you think about the book. What stood out to you so far in the book, and what has spoke to you or resonated with you. I just love having conversations with you on this topic. So I'm excited about the rest of the book. I'm excited about making changes that it talks about and having that foundation for my health. So I'm excited about all of that. And check out the links I've left below. And also be sure to like and subscribe. But most importantly, don't forget to embrace your gift. And I'll see you next time. Bye.